What's going on, Giants fans? Back at it with another video here, and I guess we'll view this as a little bit of a post-mortem of the New York Giants 2022 season. Obviously, a few days removed now from the tough loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. Very difficult on Saturday night. 38-7 loss in the divisional round. I'm going to recap that game quickly. Give you my takeaways from it, and then we'll talk about the Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll press conference that happened on Monday. But first, if you're new, make sure to go check us out on all of our social media on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Big Blue Avenue. Very excited to start getting out some off-season content on your New York Football Giants and give you as much info and film, stats, storylines as you guys want. We're always open to suggestions. If you want a certain video for me to or one of my co-hosts to talk about, we'd be happy to do it. Appreciate all the support. And a quick reminder, this episode is presented by BetUS. You can sign up with our promo code below at join125. Get a 125% sign-up bonus where you can bet on the go, anywhere, anytime. That's BetUS, America's #1 favorite sportsbook, where the game begins. So, very difficult way to end the season. 38-7 loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. But before I get into anything of this game, let's stop and put this season into perspective. Who thought the Giants would get into the divisional round? I didn't. I didn't think the Giants would scratch the surface of the playoffs. In fact, I didn't think this team would finish above 500. This team proved me wrong. They probably proved you wrong. And they probably proved 99% of America wrong. This season was a success. I'm not the type of person that's going to say, oh, if you don't win the big game, then your season's a failure. No. This team was in year one of a rebuild and made the second round of the playoffs. Oh, the history, the Giants have never lost to a 1 seed, this and that. Okay. But this team was different. This wasn't the 2007 Giants. I saw way too many comparisons to the 07 Giants once this team entered the playoffs, and I just didn't see it happening. I was a little optimistic after the Minnesota win that the Giants might have a shot against the Philadelphia Eagles, and I know I picked them to beat them, but I did not think they were beating San Francisco the next week. But this team was ran off the field on Saturday night. The Eagles complete a 3-game sweep of the 2022 New York Giants. The Giants trailed 28-0 at halftime, and the reason why they trailed by so much so early in the game, the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. You could put a high school offense out there, and they would have ran through this defense. The game plan was not good by Wink Martindale. The Giants were unprepared. Kenneth Gainwell had a day. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Jalen Hurts, all those guys on the ground. You could have put any running back out there. They would have ran right through the Giants. This was never a game, unfortunately. The Giants also lost to the Eagles in the divisional round back in 2008, but that game was at the old Giants Stadium. So, again, it's been a few tough playoff losses to the Philadelphia Eagles. Could not get revenge for 2006, the last time the Giants had a playoff game in Philly. Daniel Jones' stat line, and again, the stats don't lie. It wasn't Jones's best game. He didn't play necessarily great, but if you watch the game, you could tell he was running for his life virtually on almost every play. And the good throws that he had, some of them were drops. We saw Richie James drop a clear touchdown pass. 15 of 27 for 135 with 1 pick is not pretty, but he was sacked 5 times. He had 6 rushes just for 24 yards. I mean, you have to credit the Eagles defense. This is one of those games, even though it's a rivalry game and you don't want to give your opponent credit, you have to tip your cap, to the Philadelphia Eagles. They were the better football team. They outclassed the Giants. Jalen Hurts is one of the best quarterbacks in the league this season. Not in the NFL overall, but this season he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. The Giants were taken out of their game plan early. They only could rush Saquon Barkley 9 times throughout the game. But on those 9 rushes, he had 61 yards. That included a 39-yard scamper early on in that third quarter. He also had 2 catches for 21 yards. He had a nice catch on the sideline, made a couple guys miss. I thought Matt Breida was solid too in the backup role. We saw the Wildcat formation where Barkley takes the direct snap, hands it off to Breida for the Giants' only touchdown of the game. Breida had 4 rushes for 23 yards in that one score. And also, I believe it was a third down. Jones was flushed out of the pocket, and he throws a nice pass, a beautiful two-handed catch by Matt Breida for 19 yards. So a guy who was used sparingly this season in the backup role had a pretty solid game, in my opinion. Richie James led the receiving corps, 7 catches for 51 yards, but you have to credit the Philadelphia Eagles. Bradbury had that 1 pick. Darius Slay had a good game. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson made some nice tackles in open space. Reed Blankenship had a couple good plays too. And that secondary held Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, and Daniel Bellinger all to just 1 reception each. Slayton's 1 catch was for like 3 yards. Hodgins had a catch for like 5 yards. And then Bellinger had a minimal game on his, I believe, as well. So, it was a tough game for the Giants offense. Evan Neal got blown up a little bit. The interior offensive line was not good. We saw Fletcher Cox had a sack. We also saw, Jordan Davis made a couple plays late in the game when the Eagles had their backups in. They put Minshew in. Josh Sweat had 1.5 sacks in the game. Brandon Graham had another sack. Hassan Reddick had 1.5 sacks as well. That was my player to watch for Philly's defense. Had 5 tackles and 3 quarterback hits as well on top of that 1.5 sacks. And the Eagles' offense was just superior. They had 416 yards. They were 10 of 14 on third down. Couldn't get off the field on third down, even with the healthy secondary, with X, with Adoree, all those guys back. I will say they did have a good game plan for A.J. Brown, but Dallas Goedert blew them up. He had that 1 touchdown, 5 catches for 58 yards. Devontae Smith, 6 catches for 61 yards and 1 score. He scored the 2nd touchdown of the game. Boston Scott, 6 rushes for 32 yards and 1 touchdown. Gainwell had a touchdown as well on 12 rushes for 112 yards. Gainwell averaged over 9 yards per carry. Miles Sanders, 17 rushes for 90 yards. He averaged over 5 yards per carry. So it was just not good, right? Scott, Sanders, and Gainwell all averaged over 5 yards per carry. And Jalen Hurts. We got to talk about Jalen Hurts. He was 16 of 24 for 154 and 2 touchdowns. The Giants only sacked him once, and he did have a rushing touchdown as well. So Hurts had 3 total touchdowns in the game. And keep in mind, you took away A.J. Brown, right? He had just 3 catches for 22 yards. You have to give players like Adoree Jackson some credit. But realistically speaking here, Jalen Hurts had a great game. Don't let the 154 passing yards fool you. He was really good, and he didn't have to throw for more than 154 passing yards. The game plan for the Eagles was run the football, right? Jalen Hurts throws for just 154 passing yards. Nobody's talking about it. But if the Giants win this game and Daniel Jones throws for 150 yards, everyone's talking about it. Everyone's talking about it. Oh, he should have thrown for more yards. That's the world we live in. But I will say I was very impressed with a couple players on the Giants defense. Xavier McKinney. I know he was targeted on 1 play there, but he had that strip sack that forced a fumble that the Eagles unfortunately recovered. He had 8 tackles and a pass defended as well. He also had a tackle for loss. Kayvon Thibodeau had 8 tackles. He was running his heart out. Phenomenal job by him. I thought Adoree Jackson had a solid game as well. Jalen Smith had 14 tackles, but I think the Giants need to replace him next season. It was just rough. I talked about the rush defense. The Giants gave up 268 rushing yards. The Giants had 118, which for a team, not bad, but you give up 268 rushing yards, you're not winning a playoff game. Absolutely not. But I'm going to give the Giants a little bit of credit, just 1 penalty. And they were -1 in the turnover battle. Now, that's not something to be proud of necessarily, but against the Philadelphia Eagles, that's not awful. Jones threw that 1 pick to Bradbury. Other than that, I thought most of his throws were on cue. Again, he was under duress a lot, but the big part of the problem was the Eagles held the ball for 35 minutes. So they controlled the clock. They converted third downs. They had some nice drives. And one little fun fact here to wrap this one up: 2022 was the first year since 1993 that the Giants won a playoff game and didn't reach the Super Bowl. It's either been a run to the Super Bowl or one game and done. Uh, and I say that because in '08, the Giants were the one seed and made it to the divisional round because of the bye and then lost their first playoff game. But yeah, so realistically, this season was a success. We saw a lot out of Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. Both of those guys were relatively healthy for the entire season. They both played every game except for the Eagles game that they sat, because they sat all the starters. Andrew Thomas performed at a whole nother level this season, second team All-Pro. The coaching staff got the most of Dexter Lawrence. And I know I said Wink didn't have a good game plan and the Giants looked unprepared. But overall, this coaching staff had a fantastic season. Wink, really good game plan for most of the games this season. Great game plan for Justin Jefferson the prior week. Giants beat the Baltimore Ravens this year. They beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. They beat the Green Bay Packers in London. They beat the Tennessee Titans in week 1 on the 2-point conversion. They beat the Vikings in Minnesota in the wild card round 3 weeks after losing to them. They beat Washington just 2 weeks after tying them to virtually clinch their playoff spot, even though it didn't happen until the week later. We saw the game against the Colts where Danny Jones got the standing ovation. It was just something else. And really, the coaching staff was good all year. I know you can question the 4th and 8 call in the Philly game Saturday night, but look, it wasn't a good night, but it was a good season. Don't let what Brian Daboll quoted as a crash landing define the Giants season. It was a success. It didn't help that the Uber driver that was driving me home Saturday night drove me past Citi Field so that I could see what's next in 2 months from now. But I got to tell you, I'm very proud of this football team. First time in the playoffs in 6-7 years. It was awesome to see. Now, the press conference. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll talked a lot about the future of some of their 18 unrestricted free agents, and particularly their top 3. They were asked questions a lot on Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and a little bit about Julian Love as well. Those are the big 3 that I think you want to keep if you're a Giants fan, right? Joe Schoen mentioned he'd love to have everybody back, but realistically, he admitted that, there's a gap between teams like the Giants and the Cowboys, 49ers, and Eagles, right? You want to get on the level of those 3 teams. So to do that, the Giants have to continue to build through the draft, add a piece or 2 in free agency, and focus on retaining their own talent, right? Joe Schoen gave a little bit of information away about Daniel Jones in his press conference saying, we want him back, saying that he's going to be back. They're going to pay him what he wants. We don't know if it'll be a long-term extension, if it'll be a short-term extension, if it'll be a franchise tag. We're not sure what it's going to be. We can't predict the future, but I'm about 99.9% sure Daniel Jones will be a New York Giant in 2023 and beyond. He proved it, 100% proved it. Most improved player on the team this year, 110%. And he was never bad. All it took was good coaching to get Daniel Jones on the right track. I'll argue he was improving in year 2 and year 3 as far as interception numbers go. He limited his turnovers, but the injuries killed him. The coaching killed him. Lack of talent killed him. The Giants haven't had a number 1 receiver in the last 5 years. They've tried, ever since Odell got traded. Let's be real. I wasn't the biggest Odell fan, but you know what? They haven't found a viable replacement for this man. They haven't. They've tried Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard. None of those guys can stay healthy. They've tried targeting Evan Ingram more. He's now gone. So there's a lot of players that you could look back and say, oh, well, they tried with Darius Slayton as well, who's an unrestricted free agent. And you got to give credit to Isaiah Hodgins. Without Isaiah Hodgins, Daniel Jones doesn't end the season with insane numbers. Hodgins legitimately stepped up as the Giants' number 1 receiver. He scored, I believe it was, if you include the playoffs, 5 touchdowns in 6 games. So he was really an awesome weapon for DJ this season. I know Richie James had his really bad moments, but He was reliable most of the time in the slot to make underneath catches. Big plays, not so much for Rich, but, return specialist. He had that one terrible game, but, he stepped up. He stayed healthy and he stepped up. Slayton stepped up. Not the best pass catcher, but you know what? He had over 700 yards. That's something that goes unnoticed. Daniel Bellinger. I know the eye injury hurt him a little bit, but hey, before that, he was doing great. He stepped up. And I think all this through and through is why you want Daniel Jones back in 2023 and beyond, because of the weapons that he has, the coaching, his self improving as a football player. And there was one moment in the press conference where Schoen kind of gave something away where they asked him, are you re-signing DJ? Basically that's what they were indirectly trying to ask him. And Joe Schoen was like, yeah, we know Daniel's going to be here. We're excited to have Daniel here. And then Brian Daboll gives him a look like, because it is a leverage thing as well. I don't think Joe Schoen said anything wrong. I just think Joe Schoen is very happy with what he has at the quarterback position right now. So we'll see what happens with that. Saquon Barkley, they were optimistic as well, but it's sounding like they're going to take Daniel Jones. They're going to take care of Daniel Jones first before Saquon Barkley, because of course, once you get the quarterback in place, then everything, all the domino effect will take place where you'll probably get Barkley back, maybe sign Nick Gates to a short-term deal. So we'll see. They were also asking him about like bye week negotiations and whatnot. They couldn't get a deal done with Barkley during the bye week, but apparently there's been rumors that Barkley turned down a $12 million per year extension. I don't know if this is 100% true. I'm not going to believe everything I see on the media, and I know there's some people that do, which to each their own. But I think Barkley's value is slightly above that at most because of the injuries he's dealt with this season. I would say maybe 13 and a half, no more than 14 million for Barkley, no more than that. The thing is, people argue, can the production be replaced? Maybe. Can the leadership be replaced? No. Without Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones doesn't perform this well either. Barkley also had a great turnaround this season. The Giants won football games early on in the season because their offense relied on Saquon. So you want to bring him back too. They also asked about an extension with Dexter Lawrence. Now he's playing on the 5th-year option next year. So we'll see what happens with that. Julian Love, it seems like they're optimistic with him as well, but you can't keep everybody. So is there a chance one of those big three leave? Yes. Most likely, if one of those three is to leave, I believe it would be Love. Because they drafted Dane Belton, they have Pinnock under a rookie contract, they have X who they'll have to pay X next season. So I don't know if you want to break the bank on Love. So to me, that would be the one guy that says, hey, they might have to compensate and give something up, and it might be Julian Love. I hope it's not. I'm a big Notre Dame fan. I like Julian Love. I thought he had a great year. He was a leader back there on the defense, named captain, led the Giants in tackles. He played every single game virtually. So you want to keep that man. I want to keep him. But it's hard, right? There's a business side to everything in the NFL. And it seems like Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, they have this team headed in the right direction. Shout out to John Mara, Steve Tisch, really good job in the hiring process. But unfortunately, the season ended in Philadelphia. But there's a lot to take away from this 2022 season, folks. Stay tuned for a film review of the divisional round game. We'll go over some of the top plays of the game. We'll have a live stream Thursday. We'll talk about our season takeaways. We'll reveal our Giants player of the week. We'll have a little keep 'em or dump 'em segment with the 18 UFAs. I'm really excited to talk about it. We'll talk about Kafka getting interviewed as well. I know I didn't get into that much in this video, but we do know at this time he has had a second interview with the Houston Texans, and that'll be taking place in person. So, folks, appreciate everybody watching. Make sure to check us out on all of our social media on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Big Blue Avenue. Appreciate all the support. And as always, without further ado, let's go Big Blue.